Picture this. You wake up at 4 a.m., not because your alarm went off, not because you have a morning meeting, but because your trainer, a man who looks like he was carved out of a mountain, is standing over you with a wooden stick, ready to ruin your entire day. You eat the same bland food again. You train until your arms feel like wet noodles again. And then, if you're lucky, you get to walk into a giant arena where 50,000 people are screaming, hoping you die. Welcome to the life of a Roman gladiator. Everyone thinks it was awesome. Spoiler alert, it really wasn't. Hey, welcome back. If you're new here, we dig into history and find out that most things humans thought were cool were actually just nightmares in costume. Today's nightmare? The gladiator. Now, I know what you're thinking, but they were celebrities. They were warriors. They were legends. And you're not entirely wrong. Some gladiators did become famous. Some did earn their freedom. A few even got fan mail, which in ancient Rome meant a woman threw a flower at you, and your trainer confiscated it. But for every one gladiator who got a cool nickname and a mosaic painted in his honor, there were hundreds more who got a one-way ticket to the arena and never came back. So today, we're telling the full story. The ugly, sweaty, painful, humiliating truth of what it actually meant to be a gladiator in ancient Rome. Stick around, because it gets wild. Let's start at the beginning. How did you even become a gladiator? Option 1. You were a slave. Congratulations, but you had zero say in this. Option 2. You were a prisoner of war. The Romans conquered your village, dragged you across the Mediterranean, and said, good news, yeah, you get a sword. Not exactly a welcome package. Option 3. And this is the wild one. You volunteered. Yes, some people actually signed up for this. Now, before you think, okay, that doesn't sound so bad, let me explain what volunteering actually meant. You signed a legal contract called the Octramentum, in which you agreed to be burned, bound, beaten, and killed by the sword. That was literally written in the contract, word for word. And why did people sign up? Usually because they were desperate, broke, in debt, starving. The gladiatorial school offered food, shelter, medical care, and a small wage. For someone with nothing, that was actually a reasonable deal, which tells you something really sad about ancient Rome. That getting punched in the face professionally was considered stable employment. So you've signed up, voluntarily or otherwise, and now you're at the ludus. That's the gladiatorial school. Think of it as a gym, a prison, and a military base had a baby together. And that baby hated you personally. Your day started before sunrise. You trained for hours like sword drills, footwork, shield work, conditioning. Your trainer, called the lanista, had one job: to make you as dangerous as possible without getting you killed before your debut. Because dead trainees don't make money. Here's the kicker, though. You mostly trained with wooden swords. Real blades were kept locked up. Why? Because gladiators were expensive investments. You couldn't have them accidentally stabbing each other in practice. So imagine training for one of the most dangerous jobs in human history with a stick. That's like training to be a boxer, but only being allowed to shadow punch air for 6 months. The food was also famously terrible, and I mean that literally. Historians actually studied gladiator bones and found their diet was mostly barley and beans. High carb, low flavor. They were called hordery, barley men, which sounds like an insult and probably was. The one upside? Gladiatorial schools had real doctors, actual trained physicians. Some research suggests gladiators received better medical care than the average Roman citizen. Which sounds great until you remember why they needed so much medical care. Okay, training's done. It's game day. You're about to walk into the Colosseum, or one of the hundreds of arenas scattered across the Roman Empire. Let's set the scene. It's morning and the crowd starts arriving early. They've packed lunches. They're in good moods. They're excited. Not the way you'd be excited for a concert or a sports game. They're excited the way people get when they know something genuinely intense is about to go down. Before the actual gladiator fights, there were warm-up acts, animal hunts, public executions. By the time the gladiators entered the arena, the crowd was primed. You walk in. The noise is unlike anything you've ever heard. 50,000 people, all cheering, all staring at you. The sand under your feet? It's been treated with red ochre to hide bloodstains. That's not a metaphor. They literally designed the floor to hide blood better. Now here's a myth I need to bust right now. Fights to the death were actually not the norm. I know. That's not what the movies told you, but hear me out. Gladiators were expensive. Training one gladiator cost the equivalent of a small fortune. Killing them in every fight would be like buying a Ferrari and using it to practice parallel parking into walls. The economics just didn't work. Most fights ended when one fighter surrendered, signaled by raising a finger. Then the crowd and sometimes the event organizer decided mercy or death. The famous thumbs down gesture? Historians actually debate what the real signal was. Some think it was a covered fist for mercy and an extended thumb for death. Hollywood lied to us again. But here's the thing. Death absolutely still happened. Plenty of gladiators did die in the arena, especially in special events, or when the crowd was particularly bloodthirsty, or when a sponsor wanted to put on a show. Your life could literally depend on whether the guy paying for the event had a good morning. Here's the part that really gets me. Gladiators were simultaneously the most famous and most despised people in Roman society. On one hand, they were rock stars. Kids drew them on walls. Women wrote them love letters. Graffiti from Pompeii, which was literally preserved by a volcanic eruption, includes things like Salatus the Thracian makes the girls sigh. That's ancient Roman thirst, and it's hilarious. On the other hand, gladiators were classified as infames. People of no social standing. They couldn't vote. They couldn't own property in most cases. They couldn't testify in court. A freed slave who became a shopkeeper had more legal rights than a celebrity gladiator. If you died in the arena, your family might not even be able to bury you in a proper cemetery. Some cities had separate burial grounds specifically for gladiators. Not as a tribute, but as a mark of separation. You could be the most famous man in the city and still be treated like you didn't fully count as a person. That's not just unfair. That's genuinely heartbreaking. Okay, let me give you the rare sliver of light here because not every story ended in tragedy. If you survived long enough, if you won enough fights, impressed enough crowds, and didn't get killed, you could be awarded the Rudies, a wooden sword. Symbolic, not functional. But what it meant was everything. You were free. Some gladiators won this. Some went on to become trainers themselves. A few became genuinely wealthy and respected. The Emperor Commodus, who was famously unhinged, used to dress up as a gladiator himself, which probably felt like your boss showing up to your job and claiming they could do it better than you. But those success stories were the exception. For every gladiator who earned his wooden sword and walked out free, the math was brutal on everyone else. So next time you watch a movie and think, man, being a gladiator must have been awesome, remember the barley porridge? Remember the wooden swords? Remember the contract that literally included the phrase, burned, bound, and beaten. Remember that your biggest fans couldn't legally sit next to you at dinner. The gladiator wasn't just a warrior. He was a person caught inside a system that used him, celebrated him, and discarded him. Often, all at the same time. History has a funny way of making suffering look spectacular from the outside, and honestly, that's a lesson that feels a little too relevant, even today. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. Drop a comment telling me which part surprised you the most. If you want more History's Worst Jobs content, because there is so much more, hit subscribe. I've got Roman sewage workers, medieval plague doctors, and royal food tasters lined up, and none of them had a good time. See you in the next one.